need to talk about hair jigs and everything that I know about hair jigs, everything I've learned about hair jigs over the last couple of years of tying them, using them, catching fish with them, talking to people about them. So I'm going to make a deep dive video and tell you everything that I know about these jigs, how I tie them, how I fish them, and what you can do to catch more fish on your own hair jigs that maybe you tie on your own. Fish. Another big one, bigger than the last one. This is a big one. Hoo-wee.
Tell me around there.
Now, there we go. Whew. Number 2 on the hair jig. Right there. So it's very easy. It's not hard to do. You don't need that many supplies. It's something fun to do in the winter time when you're not fishing, when you can't go out and do anything. Sit in the basement, tie up jigs, get creative, and have fun with it. You can come up with any kind of color pattern you want. It's up to your imagination on what you want to create. And it can be very rewarding to catch a bunch of big fish on a lure that you made with your own 2 hands. So we're going to talk about everything that I know about the famous hair jigs. Another hair jig gone. What do you need to get started making hair jigs? You don't need that many supplies. You need a vise. You need a thread and bobbin. You need a good pair of scissors to trim the hair and the threads. You need a whip finish tool to tie your knots at the end. And you need bucktails. You could use lots of different materials, lots of different fibers. I have found and I prefer to use natural bucktail. I think it has the best action in the water. I think it looks the best. And I just enjoy using the bucktail over the other materials. I've tried a lot of different things, but natural bucktail has definitely been my favorite. For thread, I like to use this Dual Duty XP from Joann. This is sewing thread, but it's very strong. It soaks up the penetrating oil very well to make a good knot at the end. You can get any color you can imagine at Joann's. But the best part is it's a very strong thread because when I'm tying these hair jigs, I keep it very tight. I like to keep a lot of tension on that thread to keep everything nice and cinched up. The next thing you need is jigs, obviously. I prefer these clam drop TG tungsten jigs. These are my favorite for many reasons. One thing is being tungsten, you get a lot more sensitivity from these jigs. Tungsten is a much harder metal than lead. Lead is very soft. So when the tungsten hits the rocks and stuff like that on the bottom, it transfers that energy a lot better through your rod or through your line up to your rod. The other thing about these clam jigs is this hook. This is a 4/0 Gamakatsu hook. They are very strong. I've never bent one of these out on a walleye, and I've caught a lot of big walleyes with these hooks here. Fish. Yep. I don't think this is a little one. I don't think it's little. Big walleye. Yep, big walleye. Here we go. Oh, yes! Yes! Big walleye.
Might be our day. That's a 29. That's our fish. Okay.
Still, almost 80% of you aren't subscribed to my channel. Don't you guys like walleyes? It's free. Hit the subscribe button. So it's just a round ball jig. The other good part about this jig is it's very easy to tie thread onto because it doesn't have a collar down here. So it's very easy to get thread on there and wrapped around looking good and cinched down tight. Another jig that works really well if you want to save a little bit of money is these Northland Deep V jigs. These work really well. They also don't have a collar here, so it's easy to tie thread onto. They have a different shape to them. Works pretty well in the river, cuts the current a little better, has a little bit faster fall. But these are lead jigs. It's a little bit softer, not quite as sensitive as the tungsten ones, but a lot cheaper. These are like $2 to $3 a piece, whereas the tungsten ones, the jigs themselves are $4 to $5 a piece, depending on where you buy them. So in my mind, it's worth it to have that, spend that extra money on the tungsten and that strong hook. But the Northland Deep V jigs are also really good to get started on. They have a pretty good hook on them as well. And there's all kinds of different jigs and jig heads that you can get to tie hair on too. But experiment, find out what you like best, find what works best for you, and stick with those and go with those. So let's tie up a jig. See what it takes to actually put hair on this and make a lure. First thing we're going to do is clamp her in the old vise.
Put her in the old vise!
Nice and tight. I don't want it moving around anywhere. You're going to take your thread and your bobbin. You're going to get that thread started on that jig head. Sorry about the squeak. I keep the bobbin very tight. Keep my thread tight, and sometimes it squeaks. Get that thread trimmed off. And then I'm going to flip it around. And we're going to start with the dark hair on the top of the jig. You always want to put the darkest hair you're using on the top of the jig here, and your lighter colors will go on the bottom. So just like most bait fish in the lakes, they're darker on top than they are on the bottom. So you kind of want to do that with your jig too. So I'm going to take some black bucktail, and it's going to go on the top of the jig. The other secret when it comes to tying hair jigs is you do not need a lot of hair to make a good jig. Take just a little clump like that, not too much. I'm going to trim this end here to make it flush for when I put it on the jig, like that. I'm going to throw that on there, get the wrap started. Make sure that hair is where I want it, right over the hook. And we're going to cinch it down tight. Tight, tight, tight. Keep it tight. All right, got our first color on there. I'm going to flip her back around. And now this is what I usually do with some kind of crystal flash, flash-a-boo, tinsel, whatever. We're making a green bay special here. Black, purple, chartreuse. You all know about that one. Take some of this flash here. We're going to cut a couple pieces off of that. You don't need much. You only need 5-6 strands, maybe more than that. But another tip, you never want the end of your jig here to be a flat line. You want it to be wispy and uneven. So even with the crystal, I'll kind of pull it apart a little bit just to make it a little bit uneven. So when it's at the back of the jig there, it kind of matches up with the hair. So we're going to put that right about in the middle. Get that started with 2 or 3 wraps. Now what you do is you take this other stuff in the front and you just fold it over. Just like that. Wrap it down. You've just doubled up the amount of crystal on there. And now I'm going to kind of trim the crystal a little bit. I don't want it being longer than the bucktail. But trim it at different lengths. You don't want a straight line at the end of your jig. And never, never trim that wispy tail end of the bucktail. That's the most important part. You want to make sure that stays intact and natural as much as you can. Now we take the famous purple. We're going to put a chunk of purple, put that right on top, and that'll be it for the Green Bay Special. And trim it flush right there so it's going on the jig. Never trim the wispy ends. So we're going to get that started on there. And then I'm going to kind of fan this one out a little bit. Get a little bit more coverage on the jig. And then cinch it down tight. Cover all that bucktail up so it looks nice and neat. Not that it really matters, but I like it to look nice and neat. Squeak. Then you take your whip finish tool. You're going to tie a couple knots. Trim your thread. And you're almost there. Last thing you need to do is use some of this hard as hull penetrator to cover up the threads here. You're going to let that soak into the threads and get nice and strong so your knot doesn't come undone. So you usually start with quite a bit, and it'll really soak into that thread and penetrate all the way down to the bottom. I'll put one big coat on originally. I'll let it dry, and then I'll put a second coat on over the top to really make sure that that thread is sealed up and is not going to come undone. Some of the dye on some of these bucktails is a little seepy. You get it on your fingers. It's kind of a cool trademark of tying bucktail jigs. So now we go back through with a lighter second coat of this hard as hull, just to make sure we got everything sealed up properly. Let that dry up, but that's a Green Bay special. Take it out of the vise, pull everything tight, pull out any loose furs, and there it is, the Green Bay special. You just tied your own hair jig. Black and purple with a little chartreuse. Again, you don't need a whole lot of bucktail to make these jigs work. Sometimes less is more. So play around with it. Do different colors. Make something cool. I think this poopy olive color with the purple is going to be really good this year. A little bit of copper in there. I'm going to try that out this year. I think that's going to be a good one. So how do you fish a hair jig? Well, if you ask 5 guys, they're going to tell you 5 different things. So I'm going to tell you what I know and what I do. Maybe you can try that out and hopefully catch some fish. So it's different every day. You want to try something different every day. Try different cadence. Sometimes you really want to pop it up high and let it fall. There we go. I just went to turn my live scope to see if I could see my jig where it was at. And we hooked a fish. Thank you. Hair jig in the mouth. Right there. Little guy. Sometimes you want to give it short little twitches. Sometimes you want to give it the patented double twitch. Yep. Double twitch. There were 4 or 5 of them out there that I tossed at. Here we go. Yeah. Not bad. Not bad. Yep. There it is. The Green Bay special. Hair jigs, walleyes. Go back. When I twitch it like this, it must bring it off the bottom enough, because it takes a second for it to hit the bottom again, and it gives them enough time to really grab it, to feel a bite. I thought I saw Doug Wegner doing that one day, and I started doing it, and I started hammering fish. I thought I watched him do it one day. That's why I started. He was doing some kind of swim bait, and he was keeping his rod tip real low like that, and he was putting us to shame. Sometimes you want to drag it along the bottom.
Just lifting it very slow instead of.
Yep. Just lifting it slow. That time I needed the stinger hook. He's just got the stinger hook. There we go. Oh shit. Hey. It's different every day. Water temperature, the mood of the fish. You got to make sure you experiment. Try different things, because you never know what one's going to be the ticket that day. Should you use a stinger hook? Yes. Yes, you should. Especially in the springtime, early spring, when that water's cold. If that water's below 40 degrees, you should definitely be using a stinger hook. If you're not using a stinger hook when that water's cold like that,
you're an idiot.
So make sure if you're in clean water or clean bottom, you don't have a lot of debris, you don't have any weeds or muck or anything like that, put that stinger hook on the jig, because you're going to catch more fish with it. I never used to use a stinger hook. We just started last year, and I'll tell you, we caught a lot more fish on that stinger hook with just the stinger hook than we would have without it. Obviously, if we caught them with just the stinger hook, we wouldn't have caught that fish if we didn't have that on there. So when the water's cold and those fish are lethargic, they'll chase that bait, they'll nip at the tail of the bait. Get that stinger hook on there, because you will catch more fish. Once the water warms up, the fish are more aggressive. They're really hitting it. You don't need that stinger hook anymore. It can get in the way. It can get tangled up sometimes. It can be kind of annoying. So once the water's warmer and the fish are more aggressive, take the stinger hook off. Keep using that hair jig the way you normally would. I use a hair jig from ice out all the way up until the end of May. It's probably my number one lure all the way to the end of May. I'll keep this rod and reel rigged up, ready to go that whole time frame. Rod and reel. So for a rod, I've been using a 7'3" medium light extra fast St. Croix Legend Extreme. This has been a very good rod for me. Obviously, it's very expensive, super high-end rod. You don't need to spend however much money this rod costs. You don't need to get one of these. But any 7-foot plus medium light extra fast rod, I think is going to do the job for you, whatever brand you like. This year, Kurt from Cade is working on a 7'2" medium light extra fast hair jig rod for us. So we can test those out, and hopefully he'll have those for sale soon. So he is experimenting. Hopefully I can get one of those soon and put some fish in the boat. But medium light, extra fast, whatever length you prefer is what I would recommend for hair jigs. Reels, again, that's personal preference. Again, I prefer Daiwa reels. I put a Daiwa ballistic on this. It's a little bougie setup. St. Croix Legend Extreme and a Daiwa ballistic, but you definitely don't need to spend that much money to be effective with hair jigs. Keep it within your budget. Spend as much as you want to, but get a medium light, extra fast rod and a decent reel. And you're going to catch some fish with hair jigs this spring. There it is. All the damage. So there it is. Everything I've learned about hair jigs, how to tie them, how to use them, how to catch fish with them. Hopefully this helps you. You might want to start tying your own jigs. It's very rewarding. It can be a lot of fun to catch big fish on a lure that you made with your own hands. So go out and give it a try. You don't need to spend a lot of money to get started. These tools, these equipment, $40, $50, you can have a whole setup of tools. You buy a couple bucktails, a couple flashes. I'd say for under $100, you can really get into this and start making your own jigs. It just takes a little practice to get the techniques down, to learn how to do it properly, and have some really good-looking lures that you can catch fish on and have a good time. So I'm hoping to get back out on the water soon on the next couple days. This early spring bite, Fox River, O'Connell, we'll be out there somewhere. If you see us out on the water in the old Skeeter this spring, stop and say hi. I'll tell you where the fish are or where they aren't. And hopefully everybody has a good time out there this spring and catches a ton of fish. Thanks for watching.